Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. What you're about to watch is part 2 of a 2-part lecture series on advanced visual presentation. Now, if you didn't watch the first part, you probably want to because there are some deeper principles that I'm going to be drawing upon from the first lecture and application of the second part. And in the second part, you're going to learn how to apply some of the principles from the first lecture in your presentations. Now, what's nice about what I'm about to teach you is it can apply both in PowerPoint and non-PowerPoint presentations as well. So even if you don't have visual aids behind you, you will be able to use the concepts that I teach you in this second part. But it's best when you can have the visual aids behind you, of course. But either way, I hope you enjoy it and that you learn some things that will be useful to you regardless of what type of presentation you're giving. A good example of making the abstract concrete that I think will be helpful when you're doing your persuasive presentations or anytime you have to persuade people or make something really concrete for somebody is when you're presenting numbers. A lot of times students, when they do their persuasive speeches, they really try to convince you by throwing out large numbers of things. But the problem is with statistics and large numbers is sometimes we just don't get it. And what I'm going to show you in this next section is how to present numbers in a way that's effective. Now, we're not talking about data visualization and charts per se. We're talking more generally here. Even if you didn't have PowerPoint, you would still be able to present numbers in the ways that I'm about to show you. So this applies regardless if you have PowerPoint or not. Let's just take a number like 480,000. 480,000 represents the number of people who die related to tobacco use every year, as of 2018, according to the CDC. Now, I want you to think for a moment of 480,000 people. So just in your head, I want you to think of 480,000 different individuals. Right now, let's go. Okay, so 480,000. It cannot be 396,000, cannot be 5,000. It has to be exactly 480,000 people. Okay, so in your head, 480,000 faces. Okay, can you think 480,000? Okay, no, that's 2,000. No, that's 398,000. No, 454. Nope, gotta head to 480,000. Okay, you can't do it. You just cannot do it. You cannot think of 480,000 people. So this looks like a large number because it has a lot of zeros, but it's really hard for us to comprehend large numbers as humans. It's just really hard. We just don't have that ability. So how do we make 480,000 more staggering? How can we make it so when I present this number in a speech about why you shouldn't smoke, that 480,000 will really stick and also be really understandable? Well, let's look at 3 techniques for doing that. The first technique. Scale it down. What do we mean by scale it down? Every 65 seconds, if you were to do the math on 480,000 deaths, every 65 seconds, somebody dies of a smoking-related illness. So instead of just saying 480,000 people die every year from smoking-related illnesses, why don't you just say every 65 seconds, somebody will die of a smoking-related illness? And then if you have this lovely timer embedded in your PowerPoint, you can have the audience sit through 65 seconds of waiting for someone to pass away. Now, I know that's pretty morbid, but that can get the point across really well. And then your audience can really start to think, if every 65 seconds somebody dies, this is what 65 seconds feel like, and this is how fast it goes. And already somebody's about to pass away. And then you pair it with a nice picture of somebody really experiencing grief, and then it can really hit home. Because remember, if you want to convey emotions, you got to show faces. You got to show faces of people because that's the most relatable part of a human being is their face. But let's just say you don't want to do that. You don't want to scale it down. Or maybe you do want to scale it down, but you want to try some other techniques. So scaling it down. Take the big number and break it down into smaller numbers that we can understand. And maybe on a time scale, you can do it like that. There are some other ways you can do it too. The The second way you can make numbers more understandable and give them that little more bigger of a punch is you can do a numerical comparison. So when you do a numerical comparison, what you're going to do is you're going to compare the number to some other events that add up to that number. Or you're going to find a number and compare it to another number that we find shocking. Let me give you an example. I might say that cigarettes have killed more Americans in the past 5 major wars combined. Here's a graph. You can see that cigarettes dwarfs World War II, Vietnam, Korean War, Iraq 1 and 2, and Afghanistan combined. If you were to combine all of the wars leading up to World War II, so you combined Afghanistan, Iraq, Korean War, Vietnam, World War II, if you were to combine all of those, cigarettes would still kill more people every year than all of those wars combined. With an effective chart and graph, you'll be able to convey how bad cigarettes are compared to other tragedies that we've experienced. And then, of course, always cite your source. Whenever you do graphs, remember you have thesis, and then you have data, and then you have source. Lastly, you have object comparison. Now, when you do an object comparison, in the previous numerical comparison, you just compared 2 numbers to each other, and 2 numbers that are associated with a tragic event. So you basically said cigarettes dwarf or more people die from cigarettes every year than people who have died from World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Americans have died combined. So you're taking one tragic number and comparing it to another and saying this is even more than that. When you do an object comparison, instead of trying to say 480,000, think of 480,000 people, what you do is you try to find some objects that can serve as sort of like units of measurement to help you understand what that number would look like in real life. Let me give you an example. Imagine a Cowboys stadium, the Dallas Cowboys. Not necessarily a Cowboys fan, not opposed to them either, but you know, Cowboys. A Cowboys stadium, AT&T Stadium, can fit about 80,000 people. So right now you're seeing a picture of about 80,000 people in a stadium. The number of people who die from cigarette-related deaths every year would be enough to fill 6 Cowboys stadiums. You see what I did there? I created a unit of measurement, Cowboys stadiums, and then I said, here's how many of those it would take to understand 480,000. So imagine 6 Cowboys stadiums filled with people. Every little seat, every aisle seat filled to the brim of people dying from cigarette or tobacco-related illnesses every year. That's a lot of people when you put it that way. That's a lot of people to think about when you put it that way, when you show it this way. And that's how you make numbers go from abstract to concrete. So, when you go back to the continuum of abstraction, you can see that you go from having just words all the way to having pictures. Now, you have words over here and you have pictures over here. When you're trying to make numbers go from abstract to concrete, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take something like this and you're trying to make it something like that. Now, there are 3 ways that you can make numbers go from abstract to concrete. Number 1, scale it down into some smaller numbers. Number 2, do a numerical comparison through charts or graphs that compare one tragic event or one number that we know we don't like and comparing it with the number that you're presenting now. Or taking a new unit of measurement that we can visualize and then expressing the number in that unit of measurement. In my case, I use Cowboys stadiums, but you could use something else. You could use a different stadium, you could use a school, you could use a country. I mean, you can use all kinds of units of measurements that are out there. So make the abstract concrete. That is your goal in a presentation. But more importantly, remember what Steve Jobs did in the presentation, and remember this when you do your presentations. Level 1 is Level 1 is saying it. When you say it, you just show a word, text. Okay, that's just level 1. We want you to think beyond level 1 when you're presenting. It's okay to be here, but it's not okay to live here. I really want you to push yourself to be thinking level 2 and level 3. What is level 2? Level 2 is showing it. Pulling out the MacBook Air, letting people see it. Playing the saxophone in front of people, bringing the saxophone to class, showing the basketball, bringing it in, playing it, throwing it around with yourself. That's all showing it. And then don't forget level 3. In the case of the MacBook Air, experiencing it. Getting to hold it in your hand, going to the Apple Store and getting to play with it, or Best Buy or wherever. In the case of the saxophone, letting people play with it, letting people hold it, maybe teaching somebody a tune. With the basketball, letting people hold the basketball, pass it around. In the case of the Electoral College, having a sample election and let people see what the difference is between a Democratic election and a Electoral College Republic election. That's how you make the abstract concrete.